The crack of a whip. Laughter. Silence. That's how Irene Wallace's nightmare sounded in a corral outside Nowhere, Texas, 1869. 42 years old, widowed, stripped of her land, and called the horse's play toy by men who'd forgotten women were human. She'd stopped fighting months ago. But Angelo Thomas, a drifter with a knife and a past he couldn't outrun, hadn't stopped remembering the woman he failed to save 8 years before. Today, he'd pay that debt. Next round, boys. 42, no husband, no kin. Refused to sign over her land. Been through 3 corrals already. Won't beg, won't break. He spat in the dirt. $5 says she don't last another hour. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments section and what time it is right there. Then don't forget to subscribe to our channel to support the work we do here. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. In a time when the frontier valued submission and silence, a woman like her seemed worthless, too old to be desired, too stubborn to be pitied. The war's aftermath had taught men that some women were better used as warnings than workers. No one moved. A man near the fence laughed. Waste of good rope. The woman's name was Irene Wallace. Her dress hung in tatters, once grey cotton, now dust brown and torn. Rope fibres clung to her bleeding skin. Her hair, streaked with grey, stuck to her face in sweaty strands. She stared at the ground, unmoving. She had stopped begging for mercy long ago. Mercy never came in places like this. Then a voice, calm, steady, cutting through the heat. Let her go. Heads turned. At the corral gate, a man in a worn duster stood with his hand resting on his knife. His name was Angelo Thomas, 38 years old. Weathered skin, jaw set hard. A man who looked like he'd swallowed too much silence and finally choked on it. The leader squinted. Let her go? You touch that rope, cowboy, you die with her. Angelo nodded once. Then I die. The whip cracked. Angelo moved. The knife flashed. The rope split. Irene collapsed forward as bullets tore through fence posts behind her. Angelo drove the leader backward, using the man's own momentum against him. Within seconds, the leader was bound to the same post, his whip coiled around his chest like justice, returning what he'd given. Angelo crouched beside Irene, cutting the ankle ropes. When he saw her face clearly, the rope burns on her wrists, the specific pattern of scars, his breath caught. 8 years ago, he had ridden through a town called Stillwater. He'd seen a woman arguing with debt collectors outside a schoolhouse. Educated, fierce, a schoolteacher's wife defending her land. He'd watched them drag her toward a wagon he had kept riding. That scar on her right wrist, crescent-shaped. She'd torn it on a fence post fighting them off. He'd seen it happen. He'd told himself it wasn't his fight. The leader shoved against his bonds. Angelo caught Irene before she fell. Her skin burned with fever. She looked up at him for the first time, her eyes grey as winter storms, but hollow. He whispered her name. Irene. Her expression didn't change. A flicker crossed her face like a half-buried memory from before men took everything, but she pushed it down. Women in her position learned fast not to trust faces from the past. She didn't remember him, or maybe she did and didn't care. Behind them, the whip cracked again somewhere in the distance. Another woman, another corral, another soul being measured in cruelty. Angelo helped Irene to her feet, steadied her when her knees buckled, and guided her toward his horse. She walked slowly, chains of trauma still binding her, though the ropes were cut. Outside the corral, the dirt road stretched out under a merciless sky. Irene walked a few steps behind Angelo, her breathing ragged, every step reminding him of what he owed. He didn't know if she'd ever understand why he did this. maybe she never would. But as the corral gate slammed shut behind them, he felt the past breathing down his neck. 8 years of cowardice finally demanding payment. Angelo didn't look back at the corral. He kept his hands steady on Irene's arm as they moved toward his horse, but his ears tracked every sound behind them. Boots shifting in dust, the click of a hammer being cocked, breath held too long. "You think you're just gonna walk away?" The leader's voice came rough, still bound but not broken. "You know who owns this land." Angelo stopped, turned slow. His duster hung open now, revealing the Colt at his hip, and the knife still gripped loose in his left hand. He stood with his weight balanced, shoulders square but not tense. A man who'd learned to hold violence like a tool. Use it when needed, set it down when done. "I know exactly who owns it," Angelo said, voice level as a drawn line. "Men who hide behind corrals instead of courts. I also know you won't follow." The leader spat blood. "The hell I won't. That woman's property. You stole—" "She's not property." Angelo's words cut clean. "Not anymore." Behind him, Irene swayed but didn't fall. Her eyes tracked the other men, counting how many still had their hands near weapons. 3, maybe 4 if the one by the water trough stopped shaking. The leader struggled against the rope binding him to the post, the same rope that had held Irene an hour before. "You got any idea what you just started, Cowboy?" Angelo's jaw tightened. He'd heard those words before, 8 years ago in Stillwater, when he'd watched debt collectors drag a schoolteacher's wife toward a wagon. He'd told himself it wasn't his fight. Told himself one man couldn't change what the frontier had already decided. He'd been wrong, and a woman had died because he kept riding. "Yeah," Angelo said quietly. "I know exactly what I started." One of the men moved, just a shift of weight, hand dropping toward his holster. Angelo's gun cleared leather before the man's fingers touched iron. The shot split the air. Dust exploded at the man's feet. Horses screamed and reared against the fence. Men scattered. The leader thrashed harder, but Angelo had tied those knots himself, the kind that tightened when pulled. "Next one won't miss," Angelo said. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. The corral fell silent except for the sound of panicked horses and ragged breathing. Angelo holstered his gun but kept the knife visible. He turned back to Irene, who stood watching him with those hollow grey eyes that had seen too much cruelty to be shocked by violence. She hadn't collapsed, hadn't screamed, just stood there, bleeding and swaying, taking in every detail like a woman cataloguing whether this man would save her or just become the next one to tie her down. Angelo extended his hand. Palm up. No demand in it. Just an offer. Irene stared at that hand for a long moment. Rope burns covered her wrists like brands. Her fingers trembled. She looked from his hand to his face, searching for something. Deception. Ownership. The same cruelty wearing a different mask. "I won't carry you," Angelo said. "But I'll help you walk." Behind them, the leader shouted threats that the wind carried away. Somewhere in the distance, another whip cracked at another corral. The sun beat down merciless and indifferent. Irene's hand moved, hesitated, then closed around Angelo's calloused palm. Her grip was weak, but it held. Angelo guided Irene toward his horse, but she stopped after 3 steps. Her hand slipped from his. "Wait!" He turned, reading her face for signs of collapse. But her eyes had changed, less hollow now, something harder surfacing beneath the exhaustion. "I need to." She didn't finish. just turned back toward the corral. Angelo's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, scanning for threats. But Irene wasn't looking at the men. She walked slowly back to the post, her bare feet leaving prints in the blood-stained dust. The leader watched, confusion breaking through his rage. "What's she?" "Quiet," Angelo said. Irene reached the post and placed both palms against the weathered wood. Her shoulders shook, but not with tears. She pressed her forehead to the timber that had held her captive, breathing slow and deliberate. Then she pushed away, standing straighter than she had in months. When she turned back, her voice came clear. "I'm ready now." Angelo nodded once. No questions. He understood that some things required witnessing, marking the moment you stopped being a victim and became something else. They reached his horse. The buckskin mare shifted nervously, smelling blood and fear. "What did they take from you?" Angelo asked, keeping his voice low. Irene touched the stirrup, testing her strength. "Everything. I was married to a schoolteacher. We had 40 acres outside Fredericksburg. Good land. A house with glass windows." Her laugh came bitter. "After he died in the war, men showed up with papers. Debts my husband never signed for. I refused to leave. So they made you. They made an example." She gripped the saddle horn, knuckles white. 3 months in the first corral, 6 weeks in the second. This one. She shook her head. Time stops mattering. Angelo glanced toward the horizon, dust rising in the distance. Riders, maybe 3 miles out. "We need to move." "I know." Irene lifted her foot toward the stirrup, wavered. Angelo moved to help, but she shot him a look that stopped him cold. She tried again, failed, tried a third time, jaw clenched, and pulled herself up through sheer will. She sat crooked in the saddle, breathing hard, but she sat. Angelo swung up behind her, careful not to touch more than necessary. He took the reins and urged the mare forward. "Why did you stop?" Irene asked as they left the corral behind. "Most men ride past." Angelo's throat tightened. "I did ride past. Once. 8 years ago." "And?" "She didn't survive." Irene fell silent. The horse's hooves beat steady rhythm against hard earth. Behind them, dust clouds grew closer. Ahead, the land stretched endless and hostile. "Well," Irene said finally, voice barely above a whisper, "I intend to." Angelo believed her. They rode until twilight turned the sky purple and orange, until Angelo found a dried creek bed with enough cover to risk a fire. Irene slid from the horse before he could dismount, landing hard but keeping her feet. Angelo built the fire small and fast. Irene sat across from him, finally still enough for the pain to catch up. She touched her wrists absently, tracing the rope burns like reading a map of all the places she'd been broken. "His name was Thomas Wallace," she said suddenly. "My husband. He taught literature and Latin to children who'd never leave Texas. He believed education could civilize the frontier." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The war took him in 63. Came home in a pine box 2 years later." Angelo fed another stick to the flames. Listened. "We had 40 acres, good soil. A house with 2 rooms and glass windows shipped from Houston. I grew vegetables, kept chickens, taught reading to ranch children on Sundays." Her voice steadied, grew stronger. "After Thomas died, men came with documents. Said my husband owed money to investors in Austin, $500. I knew he'd never borrowed a cent. You fought them. I refused to sign. Irene's jaw tightened. That's when I learned what happens to women who say no. They came at night, burned the house, killed the chickens, dragged me to the first corral by my hair. She paused. That was 2 years ago. Angelo's hand stilled on the firewood. 2 years? 3 corrals, different men, same purpose. Break the woman who wouldn't surrender her deed, make her a warning. She looked directly at him. You're the first person who stopped it. The firelight carved shadows across her face, highlighting scars Angelo hadn't noticed before. A split lip that had healed crooked, a burn mark on her shoulder, the rope burns that would never fully fade. The land, Angelo said quietly. It's still legally yours? If the deed wasn't forged and buried. Irene touched the scars on her wrists, comparing them to older marks on her forearms. But land means nothing if you're dead or broken enough to sign it away. You never signed. No. That single word carried the weight of every corral, every rope, every moment she'd chosen survival over surrender. I never signed. Silence settled between them, broken only by crackling fire and distant coyotes. Angelo opened his mouth to speak. Gunfire cracked across the darkness, far off, but unmistakable. 3 shots, then 2 more. Angelo was on his feet instantly, kicking dirt over the fire. How many men at the corral? 7, maybe 8. Irene stood, swaying but steady. They'll all come. Then we ride. Angelo saddled the horse in darkness. Now. They rode hard through the night, the horse's breathing labored, until Angelo found an abandoned homestead. 4 walls and a collapsed roof, enough to hide them until dawn. He helped Irene inside, then stood watch by the broken doorway. You said you rode past once before, Irene said from the darkness. Tell me. Angelo was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Stillwater, 1861. I was 29, riding dispatch for the Confederate quartermaster. Stop to water my horse. He stared into the pre-dawn darkness, seeing something 8 years gone. There was a woman outside the general store, maybe 35. Schoolteacher's wife, someone said. 3 men were dragging her toward a wagon. She was screaming about forged debts, about her land, about her husband who'd just died. His voice went flat. I watched them tie her hands, watched them drive away. And you did nothing. I told myself it wasn't my fight, that I had orders, that one man couldn't change what was already decided. He turned to face her, though he couldn't see her expression in the dark. 2 weeks later, I heard she'd died in a work camp outside San Antonio. They worked her to death in 30 days. Irene said nothing. I was at Shiloh when the war finally took something from me I couldn't get back. Saw boys torn apart for land they'd never own. After that, I couldn't stomach orders anymore. Started drifting. Told myself I was staying out of other people's wars. His laugh came bitter. But I was just riding past, again and again. Different corrals, different screams, same coward. You stopped this time. 8 years too late for her. Almost too late for you. Irene shifted in the darkness. You want me to forgive you, tell you it's not your fault. Her voice was hard, honest. I can't. That woman died because you chose orders over mercy. But I'm alive because you finally chose different. Angelo absorbed that without flinching. It's not enough. No, Irene agreed, but it's something. Silence stretched between them, not comfortable but honest. 2 people carrying scars, refusing to lie about the weight. The men from the corral, Irene said finally. They won't stop. No, and the law won't help. Sheriff Bannon in the nearest town, he's the one who arranges the corrals, gets paid to look away. Then we're on our own. Yes. Dawn light crept through the broken roof, painting the ruins in shades of gray. Somewhere in the distance, horses whinnied, the sound of pursuit drawing closer. Angelo checked his gun. 6 bullets. We keep moving. Irene stood, her body screaming protest but obeying will. Then let's move. They made it 3 miles before the rider appeared on the ridge. Not the corral men. This one wore a star that caught the morning sun like a warning. Sheriff Bannon rode down slow, hand resting casual on his holster. He was 50, thick around the middle, with eyes that calculated profit before justice. His deputy, a younger man with nervous energy, flanked him at 10 yards. "Morning, folks," Bannon said, reining in his horse. His gaze moved from Angelo to Irene, lingering on her torn dress and rope-burned wrists. "Heard there was trouble at the Garrett Corral yesterday." "No trouble," Angelo said. "Just leaving." "Funny thing." Bannon smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "Garrett says a cowboy stole his property, cut her loose and left him tied up like a hog. That's theft and assault. Serious charges." "She's not property," Angelo said evenly. "Well now, that depends on who holds the papers, doesn't it?" Bannon shifted his weight, saddle leather creaking. "See, Mrs. Wallace here. She does remember you're Mrs. Wallace, don't she? Has outstanding debts, legal debts. Garrett was holding her in service of those debts until arrangements could be made." Irene's hands clenched. "Those debts are forgeries." "County clerk says otherwise." Bannon's smile never wavered. "But I'm a reasonable man. Maybe we can work something out." He looked at Angelo. "You ride on, leave the woman. I forget I saw you. Garrett might even forget the assault if properly compensated." The deputy's hand drifted closer to his gun. Angelo's voice dropped cold. "How much does Garrett pay you? To arrange the corrals? To look away?" Bannon's smile finally cracked. "Careful, cowboy. That's accusing an officer of the law. That's stating facts." Angelo's hand hung loose near his Colt. "How many women, Sheriff? How many corrals?" "Enough to know when to quit." Bannon's voice hardened. "You ride away right now, you might live. Stay, and I'll bring you both back. Her to Garrett, you to a rope." Irene felt something break inside her. Not hope. She'd lost that long ago. But the last pretense that the law meant anything beyond gold and cruelty. Angelo saw it in her face. He reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a second revolver, and held it toward Irene. "You know how to use this?" She took the gun. It was heavier than she expected, steadier. "I'll learn." Bannon's smile returned, but colder. "Wrong choice, cowboy." Behind them, dust rose on the horizon. 7 riders, maybe 8. The deputy drew. Angelo was faster. The shot echoed across the plain. Sheriff Bannon wheeled his horse. "You just killed yourself." Angelo met his eyes. "Not yet." They ran. The deputy's body lay where it fell. Sheriff Bannon galloped toward the corral riders, his shouts carrying across the flats. Angelo and Irene pushed the horse until it foamed, until the land broke into rocky canyons that swallowed pursuit. By noon, they'd gained enough distance to breathe. By sunset, the riders had found them again. The canyon narrowed to a choke point. Angelo positioned himself at the rocks, rifle ready. "Stay behind me." But fate plays cruel tricks. The first man through wasn't a hired gun or a corrupt deputy. It was Garrett himself, the corral leader, hands still rope-burned from his own binding, rage carved into every line of his face. He came alone, arrogant, a gun in each hand. Angelo's shot took the left revolver. It spun away, clattering on stone. Garrett dove behind a boulder, firing blind. Angelo moved like smoke, circling through the rocks until he had the angle. "Drop it!" Garrett turned. Saw Angelo's rifle aimed center mass. The man's second gun clattered down. "Irene!" Angelo called without looking away. "Come here." She emerged from cover, the revolver Angelo had given her trembling in her grip. "This is the man," Angelo said quietly. "The one who tied you, who called you the horse's play toy, who made you entertainment." Irene stepped closer. Her hand steadied. The gun rose, pointing at Garrett's chest. The corral leader's bravado cracked. "You can't. The law rode with you," Irene said. Her voice was ice. She saw him bound to the post, laughing, saw him with the whip, saw him circling her like livestock at auction. Garrett sank to his knees. Please, please. Irene's finger touched the trigger. "That's what I said. Every day, for weeks. Please let me go. Please stop, please." Her voice cracked. "Did you? I'm sorry, You're not sorry. You're scared." The gun barrel pressed against his forehead. Garrett closed his eyes, whimpering. Silence stretched. Angelo watched but didn't intervene. This was her choice, her reckoning. Irene's hands shook. Tears cut tracks through the dust on her face. The gun pressed harder. Then she stepped back. "No." The word came out broken but certain. She lowered the gun. "You don't get my soul, too." Garrett's eyes snapped open, disbelieving. Irene turned her back on him, walking toward Angelo. "Tie him. Leave him. Let the desert decide." Angelo met her gaze. Saw something fierce and unbroken there. He nodded once. "You're letting him live?" "No." Irene handed Angelo the gun. "I'm choosing to." They rode until the canyon walls fell away, and the land opened into grassland painted silver by moonlight. No riders followed. No gunfire echoed. Just wind and distance and the promise of something beyond pursuit. Angelo found water, a spring-fed pool surrounded by cottonwoods. The first real water they'd seen in 2 days. He dismounted, then helped Irene down. She stood on trembling legs, staring at the water like it might disappear. "Go ahead," Angelo said. "I'll keep watch." Irene knelt at the pool's edge. The water reflected stars she'd stopped seeing months ago. She cupped her hands, drinking first, then slowly, carefully, submerged her wrists. The water ran pink with blood and dirt. She scrubbed gently at the rope burns, wincing but not stopping. The crescent scar Angelo had seen 8 years ago was still there. Paler now against a braided skin. She washed her wrists until the water ran clear, until the wounds were clean, even if they'd never fully heal. Angelo watched from a respectful distance, his back to her, rifle across his knees. "You can leave," Irene said finally. "You've done enough." "That what you want?" She was quiet for a long time. "No, but I won't ask you to stay because you feel obligated or guilty. If you stay, it has to be choice, not atonement." Angelo turned to face her. She sat by the water, her torn dress drying in the night air, her wrists clean but marked. She looked exhausted and fierce, and more alive than she had tied to that post. "I'll stay," he said. "If you'll have me." Irene nodded. Something passed between them. Not romance. Not yet. But recognition. Two people who'd survived different hells and found each other in the aftermath. Angelo built a small fire. Irene sat close enough to feel its warmth, but not so close she couldn't see the horizon. Old habits died hard. "You should sleep," Angelo said. "I'll watch." "I don't sleep well." "I know, but try." She lay down on the grass, no rope binding her wrists, no post at her back, no men circling with whips and laughter. Just earth and sky, and a man who'd chosen to stop when others rode past. Her eyes closed, opened, closed again. For the first time in 2 years, Irene Wallace slept without rope burns forming, without waking to check her bonds, without begging for mercy that never came. She slept unbound. And when nightmares jerked her awake at dawn, Angelo was still there, keeping watch, keeping distance, keeping his word. "You're still here," she said, surprised. "Told you I would be." Irene sat up, touching her wrists instinctively. Clean, healing, hers again. "Where do we go now?" she asked. Angelo looked toward the rising sun. "Anywhere you want." They rode west for 3 days, keeping to back trails and avoiding towns where Sheriff Bannon's word might reach. On the 4th day, they crested a ridge and saw a settlement in the valley below. Small, new, the kind of place built by people running from the past. New Haven, Angelo read from a weathered sign. Founded 1868. Irene studied the town, a church, a schoolhouse with no bell yet. Horses tied outside a general store. Land stretching beyond it, unclaimed and waiting. "I could teach again," she said quietly. "They'd need someone who knows Latin and mathematics. Someone who understands what books can do for children who've only known dust and violence." Angelo nodded. They would. And land. She pointed to the open acreage past the town. Not 40 acres, maybe 10, but enough for a garden, chickens, a house with real windows. She looked at him. "What about you? You going to keep drifting?" Angelo was silent, watching the valley. He'd spent 8 years running from one failed intervention, trying to outride guilt that followed like a shadow. He'd told himself he was a cowboy, that the frontier demanded men who moved light and alone. But that was just another corral. A different kind of rope. "No," he said finally. "I'm tired of drifting." "So you'll stay? If there's work, if you'll have me near." Irene's smile came slow, genuine. The first one that reached her eyes since before the war took her husband. "I think I will." They descended into the valley as the sun moved behind them, casting their shadows long and forward. Irene walked the last 100 yards on her own, Angelo leading the horse but letting her set the pace. She moved slowly, her body still healing, but she moved unaided. No ropes, no posts, no men deciding where she could go or how fast she could get there. The townspeople watched this woman in a torn dress and a cowboy with a rifle approach. They'd seen people running before. Most folks out here were running from something. But there was something different about these two. Something that looked less like flight and more like arrival. Irene stopped at the edge of town, turned back to see where she'd come from. The dust that had tried to swallow her. The corrals that had tried to break her. The frontier that had tried to erase her name. She was still Irene Wallace. Widow, landowner, teacher, survivor. "Ready?" Angelo asked. She touched her wrists one last time. feeling the scars that would never fully fade, the marks that proved she'd survived what was meant to destroy her. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." Because survival itself was rebellion. Because dignity couldn't be stolen, only surrendered. And Irene Wallace had never signed those papers. The dust could not keep her. Drop a comment below with the time and place you're watching from. I want to know where this story found you, and if you believe some stories are worth staying for. Hit that subscribe button. More tales of survival, sacrifice, and the courage it takes to stay are coming.